All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Klingenstein Center's webinar on Asia and schools during COVID-19. We're joined by 4 leaders in various parts of Asia who are leaders in independent international schools who are here to share with us their experience of dealing with the crisis of COVID-19 from everything from going online to leading their schools remotely. So thank you all for being here tonight and taking the time to listen to our panelists. And I want to thank the panelists for joining us tonight in the midst of all that they're dealing with to share their experiences and their insights. Just so you know, tonight we are using the back channel chat for a back channel conversation. But if you want your questions to go to the panelists, please use the Q&A feature on the webinar so that we get those questions fed to the panelists after they're done with their comments tonight. And then also, we'd like for you to complete a quick poll before we get started, just so that we know who's joined us, where you're from, and how long you've been online. So the first poll you're going to see is, where is your school? And that'll pop up in a moment for you to answer. Okay, so right now it looks like the majority folks are in North America, a few Asia, a few South America. Okay, we're going to end poll. So 91% of us are here in North America and a few South America and Asia. Okay, thank you all for joining us from where you are. Now we'd like to know how long your school has been online. So in a moment, we'll launch that poll for you to respond to. Okay, so it looks like the bulk of us are in that 1 to 2 week period where we're just transitioning on to online. I know a lot of us are just coming off of spring break and had a busy spring break planning for that online transition. The next is just 3 to 4 weeks, and we have a small percentage of folks who aren't yet online. So I think all of us are in a place, no matter how long you've been online, all of us are in a place where we're still in a moment of learning around this mode and platform of work. So thank you all for joining us. And okay, I know that people are still arriving. All right, so thank you all for being here with us tonight, and we're going to get started with our panelists' comments. And as I shared with folks a few minutes ago, please remember to use the Q&A function for any questions that you want to have the panelists respond to later in the program. So I'm going to turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves to the audience and to share their insights with us. Thank you so much for doing this with us tonight. So maybe we'll start with Karrie.
Okay, sounds good. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I am the head of school at Stamford American School in Hong Kong, and we are now in our 9th week of online learning. And it's very interesting for me to see that many of you are in your 1st and 2nd week, because our teachers compare this journey to a roller coaster ride. And I would say weeks 1 and 2 were definitely a challenging part of the roller coaster, and it does get easier. We were in a unique situation in Hong Kong in that before the outbreak, we also experienced protests, and we had experienced school closure due to the protests. And so we actually had our online learning set up and had gathered parent feedback, and we would use the online learning during the school closures because of the protests. So when we were closed for the outbreak, while there were still challenges, we had a solid foundation in place. And there was quite a bit of panic in Hong Kong, just as far as, you know, teachers and families wondering if they might get sick. And so many of them left the country actually to different parts of the world. But we did continue the online teaching and learning in the Hong Kong time zone this entire time. So it's a combination of live online lessons, also with downloadable content. Now, interesting, recently, all of our teachers have come back to Hong Kong, and families most have returned as well. So now everyone is in the same time zone. So that makes it much easier. One thing that we did at the very beginning, not knowing how long this would last, was we had teachers in teams look at what was most important to teach, what were the core skills, so that they didn't feel that we needed to teach everything to the students. We didn't try to replicate what we were doing in the classroom online, but really just focus on those key skills. And we tried to continue traditions and the fun in the classroom. So, you know, for example, our grade 4s were supposed to be on camp this week, and instead they're making blanket forts at home and sharing their designs and reading their campfire stories and having fun in that way. So one of the challenges we have had is really continuing that sense of normalcy. And what we found was really helpful, and this was something we didn't expect, was supporting students and families in setting up a schedule and a routine. So actually reminding, you know, families and children to still set their alarms, still, you know, take their showers, eat their breakfast, get dressed, and actually be ready for the day. Just to add that piece of structure. And so we've had, you know, multiple webinars for families, not only on setting up a routine, but on various aspects of how they can support their child's well-being during this time. And the same goes for faculty and staff. We do continue that sense of routine and normalcy. So for example, we still have our Monday faculty meetings, teams still meet at their designated times. And the way we do that is different. It's online, of course, but we continue with that structure. So, you know, committees continue to work, you know, really life continues. It's just in a different format online. So that's where we're at. We don't know when we're going to reopen. We're waiting.
Thank you. And let's go around, and I should actually add one thing for Karrie. Karrie was actually at the center doing her head's fellowship when all of this was breaking at her school. So managing it from afar, even before you went into remote leadership. So that was another added layer for you. I know that you were carrying while you were dealing with that transition. Let's go around and just get quick introductions, just so everyone hears names and schools, and then we'll continue with the comments from your various locations. Okay, so John, you wanna introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's great to have a chance to talk to everyone again, and it's really always great to reconnect. So my name is John Liu. So my role is I'm the regional coordinator for university and career guidance, and I work for Chung International Education School. So we have schools throughout China, but I'm currently based in Shanghai.
Great, thank you. Kelli?
Hi, my name is Kelli Sanchez. I'm the Dean of Students at Keystone Academy, which is in Beijing, China, but I am actually still in the US, so I've been working remotely since we started our online learning.
Great, thank you. And Chris?
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Wilcox, and I'm at the Western International School of Shanghai. At the school, I am one of the assistant principals, and I am also the head of University and Careers Counseling.
Great, thank you. So who would like to pick up on the comments and thoughts that Karrie shared with us? Any threads that you heard or things that resonated with you that you'd like to continue talking about? Yeah, Kelli, go ahead.
Just that maintaining the sense of normalcy and fun. As the Dean of Students, I'm looking at overall student wellness. So some of the things that I've been focusing on are student support and pastoral care in general. And what I think when we started this, we thought that we would try to do everything the same way that we normally do it. And we found that that doesn't work. And so we're looking at the platforms that we use. We're using Microsoft Teams and ManageBack for both teaching, but also the like advisory and things like that. So, we felt from the beginning very strongly that our advisory system should continue. But of course, we've sort of thrown out our normal social emotional learning curriculum based on what's happening socially and emotionally with the kids right now. So that was one thing for sure, setting up that schedule that's taken a lot of support. And I would also say just communication with families and with students. In the very beginning, it was a lot of just making the contact with students and making sure that they had everything they need. We were not in the position that we were all set up previous to, like when we left for our break, we thought that we would all be back. And so people didn't have all of their materials and things like that. And we weren't set up in the same way that Karrie's school probably was. But we certainly had platforms that we were able to utilize and are still using now that we're in, we'll be in week 8 when we start up again next week with spring break. But we've, putting those systems in place as far as communication has taken some time so that families don't get slammed with, like an individual family doesn't get slammed with information about that particular child, or whether it's coming from just the high school office or all the teachers seem to be communicating things at the same time. That's probably the biggest challenge that that I think we've worked out over the last few weeks, in weeks 6, 7.
I can jump on here a little bit. We've also tried to keep things as similar as possible. However, I do think it's important also to allow your community to have the honest conversation that things are not going to be the same. And I think we all have to allow our community to mourn that there is a loss. There's the loss of your community. It doesn't mean that it's, there isn't a future, there isn't, a road ahead. Of course there is. But, everyone has to take their time to go through those emotions and to understand exactly what is happening in the community and how certain things will continue on and certain things won't. So jumping onto what Kelli said, I also think everybody has to be open to changing and to growing and evolving. A great example for us is that we had a schedule. I think many of us think the first gut instinct might be we want to stick to that schedule because that's what the students know and that's what would work, best in their minds. But actually, as time went on, and remember, we're now in, I think, week 9 of online learning, so we're really in the long distance here. It's really not sustainable, at least we found in our own community, to have students who are engaged with 6 to 7 classes a day. So we actually threw our schedule out and we actually created a bit of a block schedule where it might be that they're only addressing 1 or 2 classes a day because it's just not, students cannot go at the same pace that they were going when they were in school. Like it has to be adjusted. And the community has to understand that you must slow down. You must allow students the opportunity to breathe and to understand that they can't, have those same expectations. And for us as a community to say that, as a student, you are now going to, have online classes and essentially teach yourself and then do work. It has to slow down and we have to be flexible for that. So yes, keeping that stability, but also understanding that there are things that just have to move and change.
And I'll just add one more kind of thematic point to what everyone has been sharing, and I would say is collaboration, meaning collaborating not only with within the people within your school, but also your other stakeholders, whether it be other schools in your independent or public schools in your area, as also with universities. So to give some context in that, so one of the challenges we faced is that as the head of college counseling, colleges usually come and visit our schools in the spring. They have a chance to speak with students, they connect with students, and students really rely on that resource and that connection. So, all of a sudden, there's another disruption, right? Especially for our juniors and our seniors, this is a high stress time of what's going to happen next. As a community of university admissions officers and college counselors, we organized a set of webinars, and everybody was creating and everybody was kind of getting scheduled, and we just put it on one website. And we together as an international school community broadcast it out to everyone. So it just made that access point and that resource easier. So now using technology and collaboration, students from throughout China and Asia are able to jump on and find a webinar and connect with the university admissions counselor about a certain topic. That can be students and parents. And I think, this is, as everyone has been sharing, it's been ongoing and developing. So recently we've heard that for us, the IB exams and the A-level exams have been canceled, right? Which raises another level of stress. But I think because we set up that network of collaboration and resource, it was much easier now for our universities to connect with students. Of course, they're going to email students, but offer another webinar, like this is an update for what's going on in the UK. This is an update for what's going on in the US. So I think the collaboration of everyone pooling their resources together to problem solve really helps to bring more resources and build more stronger community, because now you'll be surprised that, what are all the different things people are facing, and also you learn from that, and it helps your school actually prepare.
I just want to remind attendees that you can use the Q&A function to share any questions that you have that you would like to have passed on to the panelists after they've completed their comments. So in terms of John's comments about collaboration beyond your school, what have others done or seen that works in terms of building that network for yourselves as you make this transition for your schools?
Well, one of the teams that I collaborate with quite regularly is the Klingenstein cohort, actually. So most Monday mornings for me, Sunday evenings in the US, we come together to share challenges and ideas, which is quite nice.
That's great.
I mean, I think that the big one, of course, is social media. All of us have probably some various connections professionally on social media. For many of us, I also am at an international baccalaureate school, so we're all connected on there, and there's people constantly processing what might be going on with the IB, what the next steps are. And I think just hearing that everybody else is going through similar thoughts, feelings, concerns, and trying to brainstorm the best solutions is very, very helpful. So I have to say Facebook has been a really wonderful outlet, I think, for many of us professionally in these difficult times.
I can add another resource that our teachers use quite frequently, and I do as well, as Twitter. A lot of great ideas are being shared currently through Twitter and other social media also.
And I also, just to add, I see a question here from the Q&A about a new parent handbook or distance learning handbook.
Mm-hmm.
So you have one, and I know schools amongst our Shanghai schools have shared with each other's handbooks just to see what's best practice. So if you guys would, like a copy of our distance learning guidelines and then copies of the distance learning handbook from other international schools in Shanghai, you can feel free to email me later on. Nicole, if it's okay, or to email with others, I'll be fine to share. Again, although we will share this handbook, just to say each handbook is going to be specific to the school, right, and to that school context. So please just do use it as a reference, because it may not be feasible for everyone.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. We'll share out, for those of you who are open to folks reaching out to you, we'll share out contact information, and a recording of this webinar will be shared as well for people's resources. I will point to one question about Chris's comments. This is from Liz Perry. I appreciate Chris's comments about grief and acknowledging the losses even as we focus on things in our control. And she's wondering, what creative ideas do the panelists have for reimagining beloved traditions, including commencement, as well as introducing new rituals and traditions for this moment? And perhaps if you can think about that, I mean, I think folks here in the US have been asking that question a lot, particularly with regards to seniors graduating from high school, but also if you have any ideas regarding other moments of transition in school, you know, an 8th grader moving up to 9th, or a 4th grader moving to middle school, or the daily traditions of, you know, bringing donuts to school for your advisory, right? So anything that comes to mind where you've worked on traditions, rituals, or daily practices to create a sense of community and belonging would be great to hear about.
I'll from the beginning, we have a morning meeting every week for each grade level, and we have kept that. So it's a virtual meeting, and it's run by the head of the middle school or the assistant head. Students can still contribute to that. You know, we've altered all of those things, but we have kept the things that are normal in their schedules. We have kept those kinds of things. We also, I mean, this is not to the magnitude of commencement. I'll let someone else speak to that who has a wonderful idea, because I will be listening. We have a house system with competitions, and we've just taken that online. So we had a cooking competition, we had a wellness competition where they just logged their meditation minutes or their exercise minutes and things like that. We put all of that kind of in our all of that just went online. So some of those things we've made big efforts to keep them going, and students are definitely still connecting in that way.
Yeah, I think those are some good points that Kelly makes. You know, for us, you know, for the 4 of us here up on this panel, I think we had a particular challenge, which is that this virus hit China first. And so honestly, for the 4 of us, not only did we have to deal with trying to figure out what we're going to do online, but we also had to deal with the idea that our whole communities just weren't familiar with this situation or understood. So from the start, and I don't know about the other panelists, so I'm guessing, you know, a lot of our families were, you know, fairly upset and concerned about maybe what our approaches were and how this was unfolding. I think one of the nice things in North America, as awful as it is for all of us, is I think there's an acceptance around the globe at this point that things are just really out of whack and that we're all just working towards this. So, you know, with this idea of the social connection, I think for us, we always have had to work doubly hard to make sure that our families knew that we were caring about them and working hard for them, and working hard for their children. And so we constantly try to encourage our academic coordinators, deans of students, you know, all those people to consistently reach out to the kids and make sure that they knew that they were cared for very much. As far as these larger things go coming down the block, I'm not sure anybody has that figured out. I mean, let's just reflect on it for a second. I mean, a graduation is just so very difficult, right? I mean, if you have a situation where your school has reopened, which may be the case for the 4 of us up here, you're going to have many students who aren't there, and there's going to be a loss for that. If you decide that you're going to do something fully virtually online, there's also going to be a loss there too. It's not necessarily going to be a fully joyous occasion. So I think all of us are thinking about how do you balance this wonderful celebration with the idea that there is that loss. And I'm not sure that any school has quite figured out what that is and are probably going to think about this, reflect on it over the coming weeks before unrolling anything.
Mm-hmm. The current graduate students at the center are working, that one of their design challenges is to think about this question, actually. And when we met yesterday through Zoom, one question that also arose was, you know, what are the traditions that we care about and want to amplify enough to bring online? So there's also this opportunity in the midst of all of this to think about what we value enough to claim and hold on to while we're waiting to get back together. So it can be another way to think about that work, certainly. There's a question from Tim Riley about community also. How did you sustain the community across several weeks? We're looking at coffee talks and workshops for parents and virtual assemblies and service projects for students, but what else did you do to help the community?
So maybe I can share a little bit about that. So we have within our wellness and well-being curriculum, we have a set of virtues that kind of underpin our curriculum, and we've always done that with our students, and we will continue to carry that out with our students. But we realized as we went through this this challenge that our parents were being really, really stressed out. I mean, and they were looking for ways not only for you to give them solutions about how to teach their child, but they were also looking for community. Because parents come on campus, they talk to each other, you know, they talk to teachers. That's all part of that life, and what makes one of the fibers of the school. So what our wellness team has started doing was not only having parent workshops, but having it themed through the pillars of our virtues. So we would have different topics through our virtues. So we carried going back the traditions that we had with students, and we still do that, but then we became more purposeful with sharing that with parents. And then I think through those virtues, it gave an avenue for parents to, I think, positively share what they were struggling with. And then through the frame of that virtue, like for example, one of our virtues is purposefulness. So as they're going through this, we would look at what that virtue means, and then people were to share what they were struggling with, but then the well-being counselor can help you through the conversation about, well, through this challenge, what is the purpose? What can we gain? What can we learn from each other? So for us, that was, again, challenges present new opportunities, new things that we did not think about before. And it has been, and I think it has been helpful to some of our parents. Again, I think just to echo Chris's comment, we're all learning through this, and that there's no one size fit all. I think because just like our student body, our parent body is also quite diverse. So I think, I think the trick is how to smartly offer different resources that we feel like are effective. And I think that's something every school is consistently reevaluating. I'm trying to make new routines because we need routines, but then being flexible enough to add new things. But being mindful that when you add something new, right, you're adding into the kind of the balloon of all the things that you're doing already.
That's great. We have a question from Stephanie Turner about schedules. So we've decided to develop a new schedule for the first few weeks that is responsive to student and teacher needs and families. It's similar to what Chris commented on earlier. So we have put out a schedule on Monday for that week. Any advice about this, and any advice particularly about the balance between stability and flexibility?
Go ahead, Karrie.
Okay, sure. Just briefly, one piece of advice, I guess, is for teachers just not to be too over ambitious. That's what we found anyway. Teachers, really wanted to do a great job and create these amazing, videos, and their lessons were over the top good, absolutely fabulous, but they were spending so much time preparing their lessons, and it was just a lot for the students too. So I think, just as a general mindset is to just, and this was mentioned before, just slow things down, keep things simple, focus on what's most important, and I think, talking with our students when they reflect on their learning and what they've learned and what they enjoy, over and over again, students enjoy that social time, interacting with their teacher, interacting with other students. That's what they're missing, is that sense of community. So I would say just, continue to look at those opportunities for students to connect and keep the learning simplify it. Mm-hmm. Chris.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think keeping it simple is really, really important. I think sometimes we as educators, right, we always want to feel like we're doing a good job and that we are, going above and beyond. But in a situation like this, trying to pull out all the bells and whistles can lead to burnout, number one, and also just lead to a lot of confusion among students. So it is important to just really get it down to the basics in many ways. I think I would also add into this too, don't be afraid to be creative. I I think project-based learning is a wonderful thing that could happen during this time. You know, students, they will get bored if you are repeatedly giving them some exercises to do out of a book. So it's just really important that you're thinking about how to, you know, shake up that timeline a little bit for each class, maybe trying to lead up to some larger things so that there's a build up to some kind of, you know, event, or if it's an assessment or just some sort of delivery of something, I think can be very advantageous. Again, being in week 9, we do, this is something all of you should know, we do consistent surveys each week with our families to see how things are going. And one of the things that we hear a lot from families is that it's the same, right? Like we're still in week 9 and we're still getting the same types of things. So I think all teachers, just the message would be, think about with that schedule, like what are you going to do with that schedule that, you know, in week 9 is going to feel a little bit different and feeling like the students have moved from point A to point B. And I'm not saying I have a solution to it, but it's something for all of us to keep in mind.
Yeah, sorry, John, go ahead.
Kelly, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that we have explicitly said expect to only cover 60 to 70% of what you were previously aiming for. So if you had 3 units left that you were hoping to teach, just know that you're probably only going to do 2 of them, and keep that in mind for the workload of the students as well. But also this sort of ties to the last question about, you know, what's important. We have our grade 10s do an MUN day, which, you know, in school they would spend weeks preparing for that. And some places may have thrown that out, and we said, no, we really want to keep that. And the teachers worked really, really hard, as well as the students, to still pull it off. And so keeping some of those really big kind of monumental things in the, that are already in your curriculum, but something else will have to go.
I just wanted to add.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to add one more thing. I think also for us to be cognizant of how much of the material we're putting online and how much screen time kids are having. So again, through in the beginning of our process, everything was online and the kids were on the screen a lot of the time. And the feedback from our parents was like, it's just too much. And I think as Chris and everyone was sharing, you know, teachers wanted to do extra in the beginning. So there was so much. So we had decided, actually, you know, sometimes it just might be, actually, it's interesting for us, is a little bit opposite of Chris, that it was important for us to maybe print out or just send out Rizzos, listen to me, Rizzos, send out PDFs to our families so that they can print them out. And there's some exercise that, especially for our primary students and our ECE students, they can cut things out, they can glue things, they can do something with their hands. And also, I know, you know, there's clearly still a, you know, I know for all of our cohorts, all of our schools that come to Kling, not everyone comes from a school that may have all similar resources. So if you have families that may not be as well resourced, be cognizant of the digital divide that is still present, definitely in the US. Something simple that you can do, actually, if you still have access in your school, to help students print out packets of material to mail it to their homes. I think some families would appreciate that. Even some, like, you know, markers, pens, pencils. I mean, just at this point, because of what's going on in the US, if your school will be able to organize to give a care package or a learning package to send it to your students and their families, I really think that will go a long way, because it's not just the learning, it's also the resources. And, you know, to be mindful of that, not everyone is in the same, you know, kind of same space or the same amount of opportunity and resources to have around them.
It's great, thank you. Scott Adams asks a question about assessment. We're entering week 3 of virtual learning at my school in Costa Rica, and our teachers are struggling with summative assessments and grading, especially at the secondary level. What changes have you made to grading and reporting for quarters or semesters, GPA calculations, transcripts, et cetera? And as you think about this question, I'd ask you to also think about the school pre-K-12. So adding, you know, what you've done in your lower and middle schools as well around grading and assessment at this time.
This is tricky. It's really tricky, actually. Our teachers continue, you know, to assess in ways that they had before. So they provide opportunities for peer feedback, for self-reflection. Students are continuing to work on projects. They continue to have rubrics. some of the external or standardized assessments that we had given previously at this time of year, such as the MAP, Measures of Academic Progress. That assessment we chose not to do because we questioned the validity of doing it at home in an unproctored setting. But the other types of less formal assessments we continue. We just had a progress report that went out this week for students. And so we did use the same report for some of the subjects. If a student wasn't able to participate in enough of the classes for the teacher to give a grade, they did use more NAs, not applicable this term than we would previously give. And then of course we talked with our parent community about why that was and what that looks like and what that means. But it is difficult, and our second semester report will be much more comprehensive, or typically is, and these are conversations we're having right now, is what will those reports look like? It's interesting. I think families really worry too, you know, what the reports are going to look like. And one thing, you know, that we keep reminding our families is, you know, this is now very unfortunately impacting, you know, students all around the world. So, you know, when they do need to use this report for, you know, getting into another school or university, whatever it might be, people will understand. People, you know, will know that this was a special time.
Other thoughts on assessment?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit. So for us, you know, one of the things that I think we all need to realize is that with assessment, right? If you're a teacher who is teaching, let's say, 4 or 5 classes online, you have to understand that the workload to try to give feedback is just immense, right? I mean, every time a student turns in a homework assignment or does a quiz or a test or something like that, that type of turnaround just is not the same as maybe if it were an in-person situation. So for us, I mean, we have pulled way back on assessment. I'm just being very honest. We might have, you know, like I said, we're about 2.5 months into this. I would say each of our teachers maybe have had like a larger assessment once a month or something. I mean, it's so much work to try to keep that going and that feedback. You can't create lessons, you know, online all the time and then assess everything that comes in the door. So you're really going to have to be very strategic, right? You have to pick and choose what you think is worth, you know, giving the feedback to, and maybe being creative, like how are there ways that, you know, maybe through some sort of multiple choice format or something, even though none of us like that format, but maybe students can fill things out in different ways that it's just an easier way of just getting some data, I guess is what I would say. And then on to Karrie's point, part of trying to keep things consistent is we have kept our marking periods the same. We've tried to keep our reporting the same. So our third quarter is going to end, I think, around April 15th. And we're full steam ahead of doing everything normally as we would, just with the understanding that obviously we might not have as much information or data to report back with. And being very humble, I'm not sure that our school would go out on a ledge to say that we feel that you know, what we've accomplished in quarter 3 would, you know, match what happened in quarter 1 and quarter 2. We're simply all trying to do the best we can and to be as fair as we can to the families and the students as we move along the process.
It's interesting, Chris, because your comments also remind me of the practice of feedback when thinking about the science of learning, and the idea that students learn through feedback, but they can also take in only so much feedback at any given time, right? So if we recognize that in our normal teaching and learning, and then we go online in a place where we've already acknowledged that you can't do as much as you try to do face-to-face, then it would probably follow that you're assessing less. You're providing pieces of feedback perhaps less and less frequently so that students have time to digest it, right? So yes, that's another way to think about it. What's appropriate on this platform for learning, given what we know about feedback. Great. There's a question, actually, a good pivot question to about staff and support. So Ann Wellnoffer asks, how have you supported your staff? And she's at a school where currently they're following the school's traditional schedule, 4 classes, 75 minutes in length each day. And some of her coworkers are feeling stretched, teaching full-time and parenting full-time. Most of us do not have home offices. Teaching from home has no boundaries. When were your highs and lows, given that you're in week 7 and 8 of this work? Any insights to offer, suggestions?
Sure. So I can talk to that. So definitely the lows were the first couple of weeks, and it has gotten better since then. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. But it's difficult. I mean, a few things we've done to support staff, and I guess it just depends on location and scenarios, but we provide flexible work locations, and I'm at school right now. We keep the school open. Our principals are here. The medical team is here cleaning. We have the operations staff are on a flexible work schedule also, but I know which days they will be here. So the school continues to run smoothly, and it's a safe place. So for teachers, then they have the opportunity either to work at home, and some of them choose to because their children, are also at home, or they have other reasons to be working at home. Some do choose to come into school, and for them, for the teachers who do come in, they prefer school because then it's a place away from family at home, and they're not just mentally, they're stepping away from home then to work. So we provide that flexibility for the teachers to choose where they want to work from.
And so was that the case that you could provide that flexibility for the long haul? Because I know here in the U.S. we're in a different place right now.
Yeah,
being able to provide that flexibility, but
it has been from the start. We've been able to do this, right?
Okay.
Yep. So it's probably a different situation then.
So I want to touch base on thinking about this idea of school structures and how things are divided. I think that one of the things that online learning is a big challenge is that the work distribution across staff is not necessarily equal. And I think that probably all of us on this panel have experienced situations or discussions where people feel that maybe their workload is more than others, or it may be an unfair distribution. This is something I think every school has to deal with and tackle. I am so in awe of my colleagues who work in grades K through 5. And I will say that hands down, they are taking the brunt of this online situation, because they are not only having to devise lessons, to deliver lessons, but they are also working hand in hand in a very visible way on camera with parents, each day. And they're trying to help coach parents to help coach their children. That is a massive undertaking. And then there are other parts of the school where it's just very difficult to think about, what goes next. If your school's closed, right? What are people who work in facilities doing, right? I mean, there's always things to be done. I'm not saying there's not, but this is a huge issue, I think, that each school has to tackle and be creative with. How are you going to use your staff in an equal way across the board so that everybody feels like that they're contributing, and that other people don't feel like that they're being completely burned out by the situation?
Maybe I can add something. I'm also I'm a parent. I have my 2 girls. Maddie is 11 and Ellie is 8. So so that's actually why I have a virtual background, because I don't have a home office. I'm sitting in where my children will usually work, and there's like stuffed animals and all kinds of stuff around me. So, but the reason I bring that up is to be mindful that, of your staff who also have kids at home. It is sometimes an extra burden because, you're working and teaching, and then also you have to parent and also deliver the curriculum of what's going on. And it's difficult. It's a challenge. And also it's a challenge because if there is something that's going on that may be an instruction that is not right, and you now notice it because it's virtually, how do I bring that up in a professional way to make sure to address that, right? So those are some interesting things for us to think about as well. And just to share that, at the end of the day, like there's so many things that people are juggling. So unfortunately, like we cannot go into our schools, right? We have to be at home. And I had Krista share before that, he has to be in quarantine in his house for this certain amount of time. So I think just being mindful, maybe it's just taking a pulse. It might be good just take a pulse of where all of your staff is at. I know there was a question in the Q&A about what are some of the positive things that we've done. So our school has done a wellness group where staff can post exercises, like post photos of their recipes and just things like that. I know it may seem small, but it actually goes a long way. It's that, that binding factor of, we all find different ways to cope with this. And it also, I think it allows staff to make new connections. Our school is quite big, so I don't know all of the primary teachers or the ECE teachers, but in these kind of small interactions, you're like, oh, okay, I didn't know this person would able to do this. I didn't know, they like to make pizza rolls too, just like me. So small things like that.
Yeah, picking up on what John said, in our faculty and staff meetings, we regularly check in on well-being, and then teachers virtually meet in small groups to share strategies that are working for them and things they might want to improve on, and just to both connect socially, but also to have conversations about well-being. I think it's just good to have that front of mind for people.
Reminds me of the comments earlier and that keep resonating through your comments, which is to remember that we're humans going through this change, and we need to be mindful of all that comes with that and all the complexity that comes with that. Certainly. There's a question from Sally Keidel about student enrollment and retention. So have you employed any strategies to help with new student enrollment in particular and retention of your students so far?
We continue our open houses and tours. They're virtual, so we have one today. They continue weekly. So we take basically the format that we had before, where we give a presentation to the families and give them a tour around the school, and instead show the presentation online, and we have the tour of the school videoed, and we talk through it as we're walking. So we definitely continue that for new families. We've successfully transitioned a few new students into the school during the closure, actually, and teachers have been quite well about welcoming them to the community. And retention, yeah, it's going to be interesting. We're in the middle of re-enrollment right now, and the challenging thing for families, especially those who are overseas, is some of them don't know what their future is. So, they don't know, maybe they had planned to move and now they don't know that they'll actually be able to, or maybe they had hoped to stay in Hong Kong and now they might need to leave. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Can you say a little bit too about how that's impacting at all your hiring or recruitment processes?
Right, so we have made a commitment to retain all of our staff and honor all new contracts for next year. We're a part of a large schools group, and that was a decision made for the entire schools group. And now we are very, very closely watching re-enrollments and planning our spending.
Tagging on to Karrie, our school is very similar. We're very committed to next year, to the new hires, to retention. But I also think that, we have to all, as an international school community, or for those of you back in the US who work in independent schools who are tuition-based, we all have to take, a collective, reflective moment to ask what is ahead. I think it's a question mark for the world. For us, we have particular issues being, in China, where, right now the border is closed. If you're a family, as Karrie said, thinking about, international education next year, are you thinking you're going to make that move to come to China? Or, if you are away from China right now, do you think you're going to come back? I mean, there's just a lot of questions, and it's something that I think is on all of our minds. And I think the only, way forward is just to have a positive attitude and to, keep the virtual open houses going, make sure that everybody, knows about your school and about the wonderful place it is, that has been and always will be, all of that. but it is something that is deeply concerning, I think, for all of us.
There's a question from, just to continue on that thread, there's a question from Bet Alter. How do we get out in front of the next wave? And what are schools doing to be prepared for what may come next with this virus? And that's a question that's perhaps particularly resonant for folks here in the US, as we are just we're on the early side of this. So what do you think about next wave transition preparation?
Well, first of all, I have to say hi to Bet because she was part of my cohort. Hi, Bet. I mean, I think that, right, all countries, all institutions, you know, and schools are included, you know, this is a test for us, and this is a good test in some ways, because we are all going to come out more prepared. I mean, which school is not going to leave this situation not having an action plan in place, right, for the next time when we will have to go online and to work through this. So I feel very confident that for the next wave, I'm not going to say much about this wave. I think we're all learning on the ground. But for the next wave, I think each one of our schools is going to take the time as an institution to design those plans, make sure we're ready to go and to have you know, a positive impact and outcome. But, you know, like I said, in this moment, right, I think lots of people use that analogy of building the airplane in the sky, you know, while you're flying. Everybody has to you know, take that leap to try that. And it's hard, and there's going to be good times and bad times. There's going to be stops and starts and all of that. But at least we can all know that it's for something and it will benefit for the future.
I just wanted to share, I think, having very clear communication, if you're ahead of school, or it's really important to be out there. I think that's a way to get ahead of the curve. I think parents, staff, everyone is looking for that kind of stability of message. And I think parents are okay with, I think, us saying, this is what we know thus far and how we're going to plan ahead. So I think to get ahead of the curve, just be in your plans that should be something that you're going to be doing. Something else because we were talking about enrollment before, and we've been doing this for, you know, now 2 months, and have a plan of what if some parents would want to now leave your school. They want to say, I want to withdraw. I'm going to take that tuition away. Have a plan with your board about what's that going to be operationally, how you can handle it. I mean, that's a way to look forward, especially, I remember, you know, many of us probably in this are in 2 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks in. So, you know, once you get to a longer period, there's going to be parent conversations about, you know, is this online learning the same as what we're having in school? It's just, you know, and that's something that I think you add up to look forward to really plan for that. And you know, and to even think and to really have a longer distance plan about what will our action plans be if we get into the fall. I think honestly, that would be probably the wisest that all of us can do, even if it's a basic framework of the essentials that we need to do. What are we going to do? I think before we leave, you know, if we go into the summer per se, there's no clear idea of what's going to happen in the fall. That's something I think as school leaders we can address. And I think that's something, as I've learned from the university side, or universities have been very clear about what are they going to do in the fall if students cannot come on campus. You know, they've had general action plans that they've put out. And for me, I would say as a counselor, it's been felt excellent to say to students, here are some of the things that they're thinking about. It may move or it may change, but this is what they're thinking about. So we can take that lesson to our schools to similarly, if this does go that much further, you know, if there's a possibility to give our community a sense of where are we headed, because we are steering the ship. So the people on board just wants to know, you know, where are we going, and, you know, what are your plans for us?
That takes us nicely to the next two questions. Nisa Frank asks, have you started to create plans for reopening, and what are key things that you're considering? And then to follow up with that, Michael Simons, what do you expect to be the same and different when your communities come back together?
I can start with that because we're starting plans and have been continued to develop plans for reopening whenever that might be. And just as a general sense, with students coming back, and we've talked with families about this too, while it might seem that we should, you know, try to catch students up on their academics right away, it's really going to be about team building again, creating that sense of culture and community. So that will be the focus in a broad sense. And then, of course, logistically, it's what to do, if a student has a family member, who's been impacted by the coronavirus, or if it's a student. And so just having all of those plans in place, the what ifs, as well as, of course, systems for taking temperatures of students as they come in and ensuring that we're a safe place to be. And then planning a bit before that, even, it's how to reintegrate faculty and staff. So once we know the opening date in Hong Kong, we're fortunate and the government has told us they will give us 3 weeks notice, so we can plan backwards from that 3 weeks. So that would include bringing faculty and staff back on campus, but likely not everyone at once. We would look at staggering that to start with, but be ready to have all faculty and staff on campus for a time before the students come, to then be prepared to welcome them. Kind of where our conversations have gone so far.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw in there, it's just very simplistic and simple, but hugs. I mean, virtual hugs probably, but I just think that there's been such an awful rift, that has opened because of this virus, that we all just need to try to feel whole again, and to know that we come from a community that's very close-knit and tight. And I think there's just going to have to be some time that's allotted for people to reacquaint themselves, to understand each other better, to reflect. And then, yes, we can try to slowly get back into, the routine of things. But first and foremost, I think it's that healing of being together again.
Thank you for that. We're gonna wrap up with one final question. I want to thank the attendees for sending in questions to our Q&A board. And I know that there was back channel conversation happening in the chat as well. We'll provide resources that came out of this conversation in other ways, both the recording of the webinar and also some additional resources on our website, theklingensteincenter.org later. But what I'd like to do is just circle back again to Michael's question about if each of you could speak to this, what do you expect to be the same or different? And then also just one quick note about what you're doing to help sustain yourself in this moment as leaders in your schools.
So I'll start. I do feel like that the same is, I do think that we will be able to get back to that very close-knit type community. I do work at a school that's fairly small, so we all know each other very well. And I feel really confident that's strong and that will return. I think that what makes me a little bit more nervous is this idea of the fear of reinfection, or the fear of the school closing again. And so, there's going to be some long-term skittishness, might be how I would put it. And maybe a lack of trust that the school can continue and won't close down again, or something like that. And I think that would play out in a couple of different areas, like just with day-to-day teaching, but also just how the school is operating as a whole. So I think there's going to be some pieces there that have to be worked out. For myself, as John hinted on, when I came back here to Shanghai, I got off the plane and I was told that I would be in a home quarantine, where I would not be able to leave my home for 14 days. I'm currently in day 10, and I'm not gonna lie, it's really, really hard. And I know that a lot of us are indoors, but literally when you cannot leave your apartment, that is just a psychologically very challenging thing. What do? I try to connect with people online where I can. I have a wonderful partner, and we try to support ourselves through it. I try to make sure I talk to my family, just trying to keep the connection in the world.
Other thoughts on what you do to sustain yourself in this moment?
Sure, I can speak. I'm not quarantined. Many of our teachers are quarantined, actually, if they had gone overseas and now they're back. So we have a buddy system. So people who aren't quarantined are bringing them food and things that they need. to look after their well-being. But personally, I'm fortunate in that I'm not quarantined and I am able to be outdoors. So I enjoy hiking, running, walking, anything outdoors. And then as Chris was saying, staying connected as well to people both in and outside of Hong Kong.
Kelli?
Yeah, I mean, along the same lines, just being able to connect with people that perhaps you don't typically. And so, I mean, within the school, that has been, we have the opportunity to do that now, given that we aren't able to go out and getting exercise and getting fresh air if it is something that you have the luxury of doing right now. Yeah.
And John?
So I would say for us, just doing more activities you did on your own, but now with family. So I like to be active, and just like Chris, I'm also quarantined. I can't leave my home. I'm on day 11, I think. I'm not even sure, Chris. But like, for example, so for my daughters and myself, we just try to exercise together. Our school sends out these like little workouts that you can do, or we find them online, and we play board games. I mean, just family time. But I'm also a person of faith. So I think also digitally connecting with other people that, of whatever your faith background is, talking with them, and or being mindful of where your pillars are yourself, and where your values are. I think for me that's been helpful. It's been given great chance to reflect, to try to think about what are the values that I hold true and that are important, and how is that guiding my thinking right now, and myself as a teacher and as a father and also as a husband.
Thank you all so much. We're at the end of our time tonight, but I want to thank the four of you for joining us in this virtual Klingenstein Center conversation about the impact of COVID-19 on our schools globally, and sharing your experiences with us from your schools in Asia. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. I also want to thank Jessica May, who's essential part of our team at the Klingenstein Center, for helping to put this program together. I'm Nicole Furlonge, Director of the Klingenstein Center. Good night, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.